Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. City officials in Miami Beach in Florida have approved an extension to a state of emergency after thousands of tourists descended for the annual spring break holiday, risking the spread of coronavirus. Nightly curfews between the hours of 8 o'clock in the evening until 6 in the morning will continue for at least 3 weeks. Earlier, police fired pepper spray balls at revellers who packed the streets without masks or social distancing. Here's our North America correspondent, Lebu Diseko.
Certainly, it's not a surprise in a normal year to see lots of people descending on Miami Beach. But I think that people outside of Florida certainly will have been quite shocked to see the number of people just packed together on the streets. And obviously, authorities there were quite alarmed. They've instituted this curfew that was going to be in place until Tuesday. The police came out, and actually, even after those pepper ball sprays were fired into the crowds, there were still people out on the streets.
Several police officers have been seriously injured and police vehicles set on fire in the English city of Bristol in violent clashes that broke out after a peaceful protest against government plans to give police more powers to deal with non-violent demonstrations. Here's Andrew Plant.
In a protest against new police powers, it was pretty quickly police themselves who became the target here in Bristol. There have been police vans and a police car set on fire, graffiti sprayed on other police vehicles and projectiles, bottles, rocks thrown at riot police too. We've also seen fireworks thrown into the crowd here as around 1,000 protesters gathered in the city centre, and when darkness fell, the clashes really began. It has been, the police say, the worst violence the city has seen in years.
The Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro, has harshly criticised local officials who've imposed lockdowns to control a deadly second wave of the coronavirus pandemic. Mr. Bolsonaro was addressing hundreds of supporters during his birthday celebrations in Brasilia.
You
can be sure of one thing, that my strength comes from within me and from you. If someone thinks that one day we will give up our freedoms, then they are mistaken. Some tyrants have taken away many of your freedoms. You can be sure that our army, and you also, you can count on our armed forces for democracy, for freedom. I would do anything for my people.
His comments come amid delays in Brazil's COVID vaccination programme and record numbers of cases and deaths across the country. A Russian human rights group says police have detained 10 children and teenagers at an art centre in St. Petersburg on suspicion of promoting gay values. The youngsters were taking part in what's known as a cosplay festival, playing in costumes representing Japanese anime cartoon characters. BBC News. The US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has called for a reduction in violence in Afghanistan during a brief unannounced visit to Kabul. Speaking after talks with President Ashraf Ghani, Mr. Austin refused to be drawn on whether the Biden administration still planned to withdraw US troops by May, as stipulated in an agreement with the Taliban last year, but he insisted circumstances needed to change.
It's obvious that the level of violence remains pretty high in the country. We'd really like to see that violence come down, and I think if it does come down, it can begin to set the conditions for, some really fruitful diplomatic work. And in terms of an end date or setting a specific date for withdrawal, that's the domain of my boss. That's the decision that the president will make at some point in time in terms of how he wants to approach this going forward.
Reports from Syria say 6 people have died in an artillery strike on a hospital in the rebel-held town in the Aleppo region. Turkey's defence ministry said a child was one of those killed in the attack in At Arib, which it blamed on forces backed by the Syrian government. At least 10 others are said to have been injured. Iran's supreme leader says his country will only return to its commitments under the International Nuclear Accord if the United States lifts all sanctions against Tehran. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said past experience meant American promises had no credibility for Iran. He said any removal of sanctions would have to be verified. In football, Lionel Messi has marked his record-breaking 768th game for Barcelona by scoring 2 goals. His participation in his team's 6-1 victory against Real Sociedad in La Liga means Messi has now made the most appearances ever for the Spanish side, breaking the record set by his former captain Javier Hernandez. BBC News.